Welcome to the Fight with Depression. My name is Christopher Boussard, firefighter and author of The Fight, My Battle with Depression. Welcome, and thank you for joining me on The Fight with Depression, the podcast where I speak honestly about the reality of mental illness. In this episode, I want to speak with you about something that I write about and speak about often, which is perseverance. So before I start this podcast, I want to talk to you about kind of the progression of me starting the podcast and everything up to this point. So if you do not know me, I am a perfectionist. This is probably most likely out of my pride. I want things to be the way I feel like they ought to be. So in the first few episodes that I recorded about them about 2 to 3 times longer than they actually were, and then edited them down because I wanted to make sure that each sentence I spoke was just right and I didn't fumble over my words like I tend to do. So every time that I would start to record, and if I kind of bumbled my words a little bit, I would stop and go back, or I would redo the sentence, and it just came out very long, and I edited that down. But while I was recording my last podcast about stress management, I was kind of in the middle of the podcast, in the middle of recording it, and I thought about it, and I figured I'm not perfect, which obviously that's not news to me. I know very well that I'm not perfect, and I will be the first one to point that out. But I figured I'm not perfect, so why am I trying to be? Why am I making this podcast try and be so perfect and have all of my words spoken eloquently when that's not who I am? So my previous episodes, when I have written down the words, I tried to do it from notes, just making some notes on the podcast, on the episodes, and I figured that it wasn't working for me. I was having a hard time speaking off of my notes. I wanted to just read everything, and I kept redoing it over and over. So I ended up writing out all of my notes and basically read the entire thing verbatim off of my notes. And when I say notes, I mean full sentences. So this podcast, I'm gonna do this off of just some notes, more bullet points, and I kind of thought this was a little fitting for the perseverance. And for me, this is just continuing on, right? Despite my failures. So this episode is also going to be different from the last couple because I'm going to be more speaking about my experiences and everything that came from me. And the last few episodes, of course, are about, my experience and my viewpoints and everything. But what I did was I took my views and I wanted to do some research on it, not just to validate my points of view, but, just to get some further in-depth information. This episode's going to be a little different because it's not based on research. I just wanted to kind of speak from my experience and from my beliefs. If you've heard anything or read anything of mine in the past, you'll know that a lot of what I say, a lot of what I write about, comes from my religious perspective. But what I write is meant for anyone, regardless of whether you have the same beliefs as I do or not. I like to write from my religious point of view, my Christian perspective, but that's not only who I am speaking to. I want everything that I say and do to be beneficial to anybody who's willing to listen, and not just a select few who believe what I believe or agree with what I say. Um, I hope that everybody can kind of take to heart what I'm speaking about. And if something's not meant for you, if you don't agree with something I'm saying, then my hope is that, you take to heart what I'm saying, and the other things just, if it's not meant for you, just kind of set it aside and not be pushed away because of it. But I'm going to continue to speak from my beliefs, and I'm going to continue to implement Bible verses. So with that being said, I wanted to start this podcast off by reading a Bible verse, which is Romans 5, 3 and 4, which he says, "We rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope." And when I read through this the first several times, I would say up until recently, I kind of thought that maybe some of this was backwards, honestly. I thought maybe, our suffering would produce more hope first, because I hope that my sufferings would not last long. I would hope that my sufferings would end. Like I said, I kind of thought that this may be a little bit backwards from the way that it is, but recently, as I read this again, and I've read this several times, and it's a big, and it plays a big role in my life. But I finally realized that the sequence here is actually quite ingenious, because our suffering produces perseverance, which perseverance is really just continuing to press on despite our obstacles and despite our sufferings. But perseverance creating character, and then our character ultimately creating hope, which to me, like I said, up until recently, I figured that was probably the opposite, until I started to think about it more as hope being the ultimate goal. So I wrote in chapter 9 of my book about perseverance, and kind of spoke a little bit why I continue to keep pressing on and what drives me. And like I said, a lot of it has been this verse, that our suffering produces perseverance. And Paul says that 3 times he asked God to remove his thorn, and I don't know that we really will ever know exactly what he means by that. But I actually thought that this was pretty good, because he got the hint after 3 times, and I've asked thousands of times, and I still don't seem to get it. I've asked thousands of times, and I still have my thorn or my suffering. But this thorn and this suffering that I have in the form of mental illness is for me to persevere and ultimately have hope, and to give hope. So I've asked my entire life for healing from my anxiety. And if you've read my book at all, the chapter that I wrote on anxiety, I will continue to plead and ask for healing from an anxiety attack, only for it to snowball and continue on. I ask for healing from my depression without any relief. I've sought treatment in the form of medication, and I've sought counseling my entire adult life to help combat the symptoms that I have. And I've searched my entire life to find my place in this world, so to speak. But for me, each day brings more suffering, such as, why am I the way that I am? What is my purpose in life? What am I really supposed to be doing? These things cause me constant anxiety, but in all reality, they're building my character. So then we ask, why do we need perseverance? Why do we have suffering? Why do we suffer and ultimately need to overcome through that? And unfortunately, that's the way life is. Life is not perfect. We live in a broken world where there is suffering. So we have to continue to persevere, because if we only press forward when life is easy, we won't know how to move forward when life gets difficult. And I wasn't going to speak about this. I don't have it in my notes at all, but it kind of hit me, and I felt the need to bring it up. While we had the Marshall Fire, there were several times where we had to continue to persevere. We had to push forward. It wasn't because we had hope that we were going to come out unscathed on the other end. It wasn't in that suffering that we had hope that we were going to survive, because there were several times that many of us didn't think we were going to. I didn't persevere because I had hope that I was going to come out on the other end. We persevered because that's what we do. We continue to push on. We persevered because it's the right thing to do. We didn't have hope in our immediate relief, but we had hope that if we persevered through our current sufferings, what we were dealing with at the moment, that the ultimate outcome of that would have been for the better. We continued to press on because people relied on us. People needed us. And it was in our perseverance through our suffering that ultimately ended in hope after everything was said and done. After the fires were out and after everything was in chaos, that was the ultimate hope at the end. It wasn't the hope that we were going to survive our current sufferings. It was the hope that was given to a community after the fact. It was a hope to rebuild together as a community. The hope wasn't for me to get out of my current situation. That's not why we were persevering in the moment. One of our biggest enemies of perseverance is pride. This may seem a little contradictory, because you say, I have pride in myself, so I'm going to continue pushing on. But continuing to push on when you have pride in yourself does not result in perseverance. Perseverance is and only comes from the face of adversity and overcoming your obstacles, because this is true strength. True strength is not a lack of failure or of fault. It's not a lack of vulnerability. Showing your faults, showing your vulnerability, and overcoming in spite of those are the real attributes of strength. Perseverance is not and does not come from pressing forward when your life is easy or your life was without failure. Continuing to push on when life is easy and without failure only causes entitlement. My life is easy, and so I can continue pushing on, and that's what I need. I only need life to be easy, and I don't know how to react when life gets difficult. That's when people give up. Pride causes us to blame others for our failures and for our obstacles. We say, this can't be my fault. This failure isn't my fault. It's not because of something I did, because our pride says that it's not us that's causing the problems, or it's not us that created this obstacle. We blame others. We blame our spouses. We blame our children. We blame our parents. We blame our siblings. We blame God, because we can't admit that our failure or our obstacles are either a result of something we have done or something that's just out of control. Pride causes us to hide our failures. This results in leading us to give up rather than overcome. This is what causes people to give up on life, to give up hope. So the question is, how do we persevere? And I'm going to tell you the secret. There is no secret. I don't have an answer for you because I'm not you. By continuing to press on despite your obstacles and despite your sufferings is your story. How you persevere only comes from your perspectives. It only comes from your sufferings. Because while somebody may suffer with a mental illness, another does not. So as I suffer from depression and anxiety and I continue to overcome, that is how I develop perseverance and ultimately build my character and produce hope. This is not going to be the same for everybody else. And my depression and my anxiety are not weakness, but it still makes me stronger. Perseverance is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. You don't want to get up and go to work because it's difficult, but you have to do what you have to do. And one of my favorite lines from the movie Gladiator, the character says, "Sometimes I do what I want to do. The rest of the time, I do what I have to." And that's how we persevere. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It's easy for me to tell my kids to go play video games or go watch some TV because something's a little difficult for me. Them asking me to play with them or to help them may cause a slight moment of difficulty, but that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to raise my children to be decent human beings. The goal is to raise my children to have a life that's better than I ever had, and to be a better person than I've ever been. Perseverance is continuing to fight when you want to give up. Perseverance is not the goal. Life is not meant for us to just persevere, just to get by. It's a trait that builds us into who we are meant to be. We are meant to do more than just sit by. We are meant for hope, and we are meant to give hope to others. We are meant to encourage others. So go out and do more than just get from one day to the next. Go out and live to give hope to others and to be the hope for others. Go out and live life before it passes you by.
Thank you for joining me at The Fight with Depression. If you'd like to hear more, please follow this podcast or join me at thefightwithdepression.com. Remember, you are not in this fight alone, and let's continue to fight this good fight together.